My name is Nate Mickle. You're listening to Mickles and Dimes Layer 2, where every interview is dedicated to the simple, the practical, and the underappreciated. Darren Heitner is a nationally recognized attorney who specializes in sports and entertainment law. And most recently, Darren has become one of the nation's experts on NIL, name, image, and likeness. His client list is a who's who of professional sports, including athletes and coaches such as Terrell Owens, Johnny Manziel, Randy Moss, Tyreek Hill, Manny Ramirez, Draymond Green, and Rick Pitino, to name just a few. Darren earned both his BA and JD from the University of Florida, where he was also a valedictorian. I hope you enjoyed learning from Darren Heitner today. Darren, it's great to connect today. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
You are one of the only attorneys I've ever hired, and you did great work for me. Helped me resolve a little issue I had. Appreciate your work. And as I was doing some background work on you, I realized you had, a lot of interesting experience. You were very involved in a lot of important topics today. And so as part of our agreement for you to represent me, I asked you to come on the podcast. You agreed. So thank you. And as you think back on the work you've done, the things you've learned from your work as an attorney, what lesson have you learned that you would most want to pass on to others?
I think the biggest lesson is taking a step back and constantly challenging myself to remember why I'm doing it. It's not just for the money. Surely, after 15 years of practice and after 11 years of starting my own firm, fortunately, it's been very successful if you're looking at success from a monetary standpoint. But the real joy that I get is when a client comes to me with a problem, particularly one that seems very difficult to solve. And I look at it from the perspective of, what is the client's goals and how do I accomplish that as quickly and as cheaply as possible? And so I think that's the biggest lesson, is not to replace the client's interests with your own, and to always keep that in mind, which is that all I am is a service provider, similar to many other service providers, whether they be doctors, accountants, financial planners. I think oftentimes we think we know what our clients desire and do a very poor job of listening to them, hearing them out, and then putting together a specific strategy dependent upon what those clients' goals are.
As you think about the work that you're doing now, you do a lot of work in NIL. What has most surprised you about your work?
What has most surprised me, I suppose, is that it feels as though over 15 years of practice, while I've stayed true to a focus in sports, entertainment, intellectual property, the type of work appears to have changed. And whereas I may have been in one bucket primarily 15 years ago, I couldn't have ever even foreseen handling, like you mentioned, the NIL type of work that I'm doing now. And even in that very nuanced space, which really developed roughly 4 years ago, it took about 3 years until it became a significant part of my business, where now every day I'm handling nonstop NIL transactions and litigation, intellectual property work, et cetera. So yeah, I think that's what surprises me most about my practice, is how easily it's able to shift over time. And it's exciting too. I don't know what will be the primary focus of my practice 5 years from now, particularly with these new tools and new technologies that are being developed. And a lot of people believe many of us in service industries will be quickly rendered dinosaurs and not needed. I don't think that's true. I know it's made a lot of people nervous, but I'm interested in seeing. I instead of being anxious about it, I'm actually pretty excited about how these new technologies can be harnessed. And certainly those who are unwilling to adopt them, I think, will face significant challenges to the point where they may even have to exit the industry.
I remember one of the most interesting things I learned in law school was how much technology changes law, or how much changes in technology require attorneys. Because I used to think like, okay, I'm going to go to law school and I'm going to learn the law. That would be it. And there's like nothing new, like you just have to learn the law and then you just
Yeah.
practice it. And it's like, oh my gosh, every day there's a new interesting issue that's created. And so I was just blown away. Like it just feels like the need for attorneys, the need for dispute resolution continues to actually grow exponentially because there's always new technologies, new things coming up, new disputes. And I think your point about NIL is a good example of this. 5 years ago, this was nothing, and
Right.
now it's a major part of your business. It's a major part of the sports world, and who knows where things are going to be 5 years from now.
That's right. And I think what's really interesting is I suppose the longer you're in an industry, the more capacity you have to gain a competitive advantage. But there's a big if attached to that. The if is as long as you continue to challenge yourself to learn and you don't get comfortable in your position, right? So for me, I have this database of information, not only from going to law school, which is mostly theoretical and outdated case law anyway, but over 15 years of practice, you develop so much information and expertise in a particular subject matter. But you have to continue to be an academic and stay on top of everything else that's going on outside of your own practice. And so I think those lawyers with experience who do that and challenge themselves have a unique advantage, whereas those of us who have been practicing for a long time and aren't doing that cede a lot of that power to a newer group of lawyers who are doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming, but I don't think a lot of lawyers continuously challenge themselves to also be students. And I don't think really we should ever stop being students.
A while back, I interviewed a Caltech professor on the podcast, Ravin Jesuthasan. He's a kind of futurist, technologist. And the lesson that he most wanted to share was that we should continually reinvent ourselves. Another way of saying that, right, is just like continually learning. And so I think your response here demonstrates that if you are just focused on, you know, I started a practice and I'm going to practice a certain type of law and that's it, and I'm only going to stay in my lane, compared to you're like, I'm just going to learn and I'm going to keep pursuing new things. And now you've got a whole new part of your practice that is built on something that you never could have anticipated. And you're excited about it. And I think that's the thing too, is like continually learning. And then a recurring theme from guests of this podcast also has been, and then latch on to good opportunities when they present themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can give you a real specific nuanced example. None of us knew what an NFT was 15 years ago when I graduated law school. None of us knew
Yeah.
what an NFT was probably 10 years ago and maybe even 5 years ago. But when I saw an explosion in the space, and albeit it was somewhat temporary, but it was a true explosion, I said, I'm going to immerse myself in this world and learn about NFTs and cryptocurrency at large and blockchain, et cetera, and started branding myself as an NFT lawyer. Today, am I getting work in that space? No. But for a couple of years, I was getting blasted and
Wow.
bombarded with opportunities. And it was enjoyable. It was intellectually challenging, as is the NIL space for me now. So I absolutely agree with you on that point.
It's been fun following you on X and seeing how involved you are in the NIL space. And based on this interview and what you're saying, and as I learn more about you, I can be certain that 5 to 10 years from now, whatever new relevant part of the law has emerged, I expect to see you writing about it and posting about it because it seems like that's just the kind of person you are, just looking for new opportunities. Okay, last thing, Darren. Uh, what are you most excited about as you think about your future?
it's not work related. It's seeing my children develop. And my boy is 3 years old, my girl's 1.5. We have potential plans to grow even further. To me, I wrestle with, and I think a lot of people wrestle with, a very foundational question: what is the purpose of life? What makes you happy?
Yeah.
For me, it's seeing my children happy and seeing them exploring new opportunities and succeed and be challenged and work their ways through problems. And that's, for me, my biggest joy. And so I think what I've been wrestling with a lot lately is figuring out how to sustain and perhaps grow my practice with the types of clients and matters that I want and that make me happy, but not letting that get in the way of being there and being present for my children. And that's what really excites me. I can't even imagine what the future holds for them, but I also need to make sure I'm not so fixated on the future and that I'm there in the present.
Recently, Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, announced that he has terminal cancer, and he was reacting to either a talk or an article that was talking about how weekends are so enjoyable if you don't have children. And he was like, on one hand, yeah, that's true because you have total freedom. But he said, now that I know I'm dying soon, he's like, as I think back on my greatest moments, he's like, I never think about Dilbert. I think about going to watch my stepchild's soccer games on Saturdays. Like that was the ultimate. I think that's a pretty cool perspective from somebody who's now up against it.
Yeah, I do too. I've recently had very close friends diagnosed with severe cancer. My mom, fortunately, just beat stage 2 cancer, and it was scary times, really, really scary times. And but to your point, I mean, I think about recently, like what brought me the biggest joy. We just finished my son. We lied about his age. We said he was 4 years old, even though he was 3, and got him to play t-ball a year early. And I was one of the volunteer coaches, and we just finished the season. And the pride and joy that came from Saturday mornings, and thinking about where he started day one and where he was at the end of the season, like that's everything.
Well, Darren, this has been fun for me. It's great to connect. I appreciate you sharing these lessons and talking about these things that you really care about and are personal to you. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast today.
And I really appreciate the questions because they're not often asked.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Nickels and Dimes with Darren Heitner. I love Darren's goal to remember why he's doing it, to help his clients. And one way he does that is by continually challenging himself to be a student. When NFTs exploded onto the scene, Darren learned all he could and became an NFT expert. As NIL transactions ramped up, so did Darren, becoming one of the go-to attorneys for everything related to NIL. Rather than fear new technologies, Darren gets excited by them and then learns all he can about them. In summary, stay people-focused and never stop being a student. Both simple ideas, please take them seriously. Hey, it's Nate here, asking for a quick favor. If you enjoyed this episode, will you please rate this podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast player? Good ratings help others discover the show and help me interview great guests. Thanks for your support.